Mass Effect is rarely mentioned in versus-type discussions. Which shouldn't be surprising. Mass Effect as a sci-fi universe operates on an overall lower power level and a smaller scale. The most renowned and advanced dreadnought of the Citadel races, the Destiny Ascension, is merely a 1 kilometer long, making it small compared to Warhammer 40k escort ships or the Imperial Star Destroyer from Star Wars. The same can be said on the ground. For all the advantages of kinetic barriers, their defensive capability is limited, just as the weapons carried by infantry. The less said about frankly laughable military vehicles used in the universe, the better. That's probably why many of you might expect this video to be nothing more than me explaining how any faction from Warhammer 40k could easily slaughter or conquer the Mass Effect universe. But this isn't that kind of channel. Throwing our favorite toys at one another and imagining how they would clash is all fun and good, but I personally prefer discussions focused on potential narratives and different scenarios that could be born from a given crossover. And that's what this video will be about. A small exercise where we consider which faction from Warhammer 40k to transport into Mass Effect to ensure the most interesting and engaging narrative, while also keeping the setting stable and not derailing the main storyline of Mass Effect at the same time. But before we begin, remember to like, comment, subscribe, ring the bell, the whole shtick. You know what to do. If I planned everything right, this video went live on the 2nd year anniversary of this channel. As such, there is an 80% sale on all subscription tiers on my Patreon. Simply use the code HUTSupremacy to get 80% off on all subscription tiers. You can also consider donating to the art budget on Ko-fi to support the Star Wars x Warhammer 40k series. It's thanks to your donation that this series has its own art gallery. I also encourage you to visit our Discord server, where you can catch me quite regularly. All links in the video description. With that out of the way, let's begin. First, let's look at the setting of Mass Effect and how the rules of this universe would influence a transported 40k faction. The most obvious factor is the warp. In my Star Wars vs Warhammer 40k series, I chose to interpret the Force as the Sea of Souls before it was twisted into the warp, allowing Psykers and Force users to coexist in the same universe, drawing power from the same source. That, however, isn't really an option in Mass Effect. Nothing like the warp exists in this universe, at least not to my knowledge, though the series does feature several unexplained phenomena. That said, deleting the warp entirely isn't something I want to do, as it would cripple the majority of 40k factions in various ways. On the other hand, introducing the warp into Mass Effect as we know it, complete with demons, dark gods, and faith-infused miracles, would shatter the setting into 1,000 pieces. No, that would be counterproductive to this discussion, so we need an alternative solution. Here is my idea. The Sea of Souls exists in Mass Effect, but it is stale, unmoving, and dead. No creatures dwell in its waters, no currents flow in its depths, no wind creates waves upon its surface. It is almost impossible to find even a spark of power within it. The reason for this are the Reapers, who regularly cleanse the galaxy of all intelligent life. Because of this endless cycle, not only do species lack the time to evolve the Psyker gene, but by silencing the world of the living, the Reapers also silence the warp, cleansing it regularly. On top of that, the overall population of the Mass Effect galaxy is smaller compared to many other sci-fi universes, with a few exceptions of course. This means fewer minds influencing the Sea of Souls, making it far more peaceful. What effect does this have on warp travel and Psykers? You can still enter the warp with a warp-capable vessel, but traveling through it is extremely difficult. In several Warhammer 40k stories, the Tyranids shadow in the warp. It described as silencing the warp and its currents. The situation here is similar, but without the overwhelming presence of a hive mind. Just as sailing on the ocean without currents or wind would be slow and difficult in the real world, the same can be said for the warp travel in Mass Effect. It's far more precise and safer than it ever was in Warhammer 40k, but also far slower. Potentially even slower than the FTL used by the local civilizations. If you want to travel through the warp in this galaxy, you need to push the ship forward with your own power alone, which can be challenging. As for the Psykers, they find themselves in near total control of their powers, but their overall psychic might is greatly diminished. The warp in this galaxy is stale and unmoving, and turning it into raw power demands far more effort, while also being less dangerous than before. It is like the difference between creating a sculpture from clay tainted with poison versus from marble. You can still do it, but it presents a completely different set of challenges. Similarly, the lack of psychic activity could lead to hibernation of a Psyker gene in future generations. We know that warp activity can cause the awakening of a psychic gene, so the reverse should also be true. With just this in mind, we can already see that a crossover between those two universes might turn out to be far more interesting than some might initially assume. The next thing to remember is that populated space in Mass Effect resembles something more akin to islands. Population centers in Mass Effect are clustered around functioning mass relays, rather than being evenly spread out. There is a lot of empty space between active relays, regions where no known civilization dwells, creating vast gaps between populated areas of the galaxy. We should keep this in mind because outside those regions there is a significant amount of unclaimed space, which could be very relevant in a potential narrative. Now, let's go through the factions of Warhammer 40k and think about which one offers the most interesting narrative, while also not shattering the setting of Mass Effect with their arrival. Let's start with a faction that doesn't really have a place in this discussion, especially with the rules of the warp we established. The forces of chaos, be they gods, demons, traitor legions, or mad cultists. This kind of eldritch horror doesn't really fit Mass Effect. The role of a cosmic terror is already taken by the Reapers, and it should stay that way. The only potentially interesting narrative would be exploring how forces of chaos might act while cut off from both the power and the blessing of their dark gods. It would be amusing to see the Death Guard fully experience the pain and horror of what they've become. But with a Sea of Souls being completely stale and unmoving, it would be impossible for demons to survive there. They would be like river fish thrown into the middle of the ocean, completely unable to adapt and survive in this utterly alien environment. There isn't really much we can do here, so let's move to the next faction. What about the big bugs, the Tyranids? Honestly, there is very little potential narration to play around with here as well. The Tyranids are a threat that would overshadow the Reapers completely. Another eldritch horror to replace the Reapers. Because while the Reapers are destroyers of civilizations, the Tyranids are destroyers of life. And I can't see the factions of Mass Effect, even with support of the Reapers, standing any chance to stop any major Tyranid incursion. This galaxy is kept weak by design, and the Reapers who determine the technological level of the galactic civilizations are overall stagnant, always making sure that technology available in the galaxy doesn't exceed their own capabilities. But that's not the only reason. Tyranids don't have characters to play with, not really, and Mass Effect is very much character-focused story. If we can't have real characters to interact with the heroes of Mass Effect, there isn't much narrative potential to speak of. Not to mention the stupidity of the Citadel Council itself. Just as they ignored the threat of the Reapers, they would ignore the threat of the Tyranids until it would be too late, most likely being overconfident, seeing the overall slow speed at which the Tyranids travel, making them believe they are an insignificant threat. I won't even get into how powerful Tyranids might become if they manage to adopt Biotics mutation for their own use, or potentially threat of gene stealers, especially with Asari being capable of mating with other species. Outside of narration of unavoidable doom, there isn't really much narrative potential here, just a more depressing vision of Reaper War. Or rather, Tyranid War. Next on the list, Leagues of Votann. Now, I would want to say that Space Dwarfs would be fun to play around with, but Games Workshop gave them very little lore to play around with. They have massive ships, fortified territories and very advanced technology, not to mention very close ties to AI, but there isn't really much material to work with. If they were to be transported, they would most likely end up in the deep core of a galaxy, where the only threat are the Collectors, who would be easy to deal with. The Collectors would be minuscule threat to Votann at best. After this threat would be dealt with, there isn't really much reason for them to leave their territories. Outside of a few scout and merchant missions, I believe they would, for the most part, keep to themselves. Maybe even downright ignore the Reaper War until Reapers actually appear at their doorstep. They did it for the most of their history in Warhammer 40k. The Leagues keep to themselves, avoiding anything approaching major conflict unless their own keeps are endangered. So sadly, there isn't much narrative potential here. The kin prefer to keep the nature of their civilization secret, and their holdings fortified and secured. So outside of limited trade, laughing at miserable technological level of the local civilizations, and beating the shit out of any Reaper that would get close to their holds, there isn't really much to talk about. Maybe Maybe if they deem the galaxy worth saving, they would share some of their technology with Citadel races that could potentially help stop the Reapers, but even that is questionable. From Mass Effect perspective, the only thing of note regarding the leaks is how closely AI is integrated into their society, and that's assuming they will figure this out despite Keen keeping it a secret. That and that they live in the core of a galaxy. That's it. I'm sorry, space dwarf lovers, but there isn't much rock and stone to be had in this crossover. Now orcs. Orcs are always fun. Depending on the size of the incursion, there could be a narration of Citadel races desperately trying to contain the orc threat, similar to the Rachni, blocking the mass relays and trying to find a way to either isolate them or exterminate them. With warp being stale, the war powers of the orcs would also diminish, as their capability to travel through the warp to other systems. So containing the orcs could potentially work out. Mass relays leading out of orc space could be even destroyed in attempt to contain them. If travel to fight other civilizations will prove too time-consuming or complicated, orcs won't bother to do so, and will focus on cramping each other. Though I don't doubt that some species, like Salarians, might try to figure out how to make them into their shock troops, as they did the Krogan, which could potentially mean breach of containment. So overall, while there is a potential for a story where factions of Mass Effect need to work together to stop the spread of the orcs, there isn't much of conversation here. The orcs would be just another plague-like species, cut off in their small region of the galaxy, or becoming a common problem throughout it. The scary skeletons are a bit problematic in any crossover, and I'm not even talking about their insane level of technology. It's the time frame they operate at. They can have arguments and discussions that last decades, if not centuries. The entire setting of Mass Effect can drastically change between the first contact and the moment they decide to do anything about their new situation. Though there are two potential narratives that come to my mind. First one is Trazen the Infinite doing what he does best, stealing shit that doesn't belong to him. Who wouldn't enjoy this little rascal capture the entire Citadel just to put it in his museum? Sure, it would be more of a comedy than anything else, but it does have narrative potential. Hell, maybe Trazen will decide to play a hero once more, as he did on Cadia, and decide that spending this afternoon to defeat the Reapers is worthwhile. The other one is a potential war between the single Necron dynasty and Reapers themselves. Let's say that during their cleansing of the galaxy, they bombed the wrong planet and awoken the Necrons, who are not amused by the sight of 2-kilometer tall mechanical squids wrecking their lawn. It could be interesting to see such clash. Two synthetic, soulless factions waging war against one another while crushing the pitiful races of the galaxy under their feet without care. A small war in heaven. And while interesting as a concept, I have no doubt Necrons would win. Weapons of the Reapers wouldn't be much of a threat. Same for their ability to indoctrinate living beings. The Reapers would be something of a novelty for the Necrons, but nothing approaching real challenge. A mid-sized dynasty could deal with them no problem. A small one should be capable of securing their own territories. I can imagine rage, fear, and disbelief of the Reapers as all they ever created is crushed under the foot of some cranky space Egyptian skeleton that keeps mumbling about the good old days and how the young ones don't respect their elders these days. Transporting even a single sector of Imperium of Man into Mass Effect would shatter the setting into pieces. And I'm not talking about miracles, technology, gigantic ships, fanaticism, or blind xenophobia. Oh no, I'm talking population. Population of Earth in Mass Effect is slightly below 11.5 billion souls, with the biggest human colony, Terra Nova, possessing only 4 million colonists. Meaning that total human population in Systems Alliance most likely doesn't exceed 12 billion. And I hope I don't need to explain how minuscule this number is compared to what Imperium of Man possesses. There are individual hive cities that have many times that number of people. Ignore everything else. The mere population of even small Imperial sector would shatter the balance of power in Mass Effect Galaxy. Even a small sector has most likely enough guns, population and production capacity to hold any response from factions of Mass Effect. Thankfully, with Imperial's overall reliance on the warp, which use would be limited in this scenario, they could be isolated, similarly to the Orks we discussed before. I doubt the Imperials will be quick in using mass relays because of their xenophobia and influence of Mechanicus. The only meaningful narrative would be how perception of humans would change because of Imperium's arrival. How would other races see the human race if they saw how they can potentially become fanatical, genocidal zealots? I also do not believe that isolated Imperial remnant could stand against the Reapers. Not because they lack firepower, but because of indoctrination. We know that mind control and corruption can and do work on Imperial citizens. I have little doubt that Reapers could utilize Mechanicus' obsession with technology as a way to infiltrate and indoctrinate Imperial sector and turn them into their puppets. People tend to forget that Bat Reapers have more than one way of defeating their enemy. They don't really stand a chance in open conflict with the Imperium, but they have a fair chance of indoctrinating them. Especially with Imperium ignoring or dismissing any potential warnings from other factions in Mass Effect. For the servants of a God Emperor to listen, and most importantly, believe the warning of a Xeno or a heretic is truly a rare thing indeed. So we can have a story of Imperial sector getting isolated and how the galaxy reacted to these new humans, as well as potential story of how Imperials were indoctrinated and destroyed from within by the Reapers. And to be clear, I dismiss the idea of a wank narrative where Imperial Remnant conquers the galaxy and defeats the Reapers. On principle, I hate power fantasies and I will not humor them. The only other workable narrative scenario would be if a single rogue trader was transported into Mass Effect Galaxy. While the technological gap would be substantial, it would be more limited. Additionally, the story of a rogue trader attempting to build their mercantile empire in a completely different galaxy could be fun, especially with how this narrative would be character-driven, which is an integral part of Mass Effect storytelling. In my opinion, such story could work and even tie nicely with Commander's Shepherd quest to save the galaxy, seeking more allies in the coming conflict. Now, Craftworlders would be interesting to play around with in such scenario, mostly because their biggest advantage, their psychic might, would be greatly diminished, and their main way of interstellar travel, the webway, doesn't exist in this universe. But for all those limitations, they could operate in Mass Effect Galaxy while remaining quite potent. A true powerhouse, even if only one craftworld would be transported to the new setting. Similarly to Quarians, they would be a fleet-based faction, with a craftworld as the flagship, a vessel that dwarfs even the Citadel itself. It would, without a doubt, shake the Mass Effect Galaxy, but not shatter its foundations. Not for the most part. There is much narrative potential here, especially for the Eldar who are now beyond the reach of Slaanesh, yet weakened by the nature of this galaxy. They don't have access to the webway, but with their technology they could still travel through the stars without much issue. Similarly, there is much potential in their reaction to biotics, this new rival power to their psychic might. I also think that even with limiting nature of Sea of Souls, the more powerful Farseers might still see the past and the future, including the Reapers, which would make them an interesting element of the Mass Effect story. A force that knows that Reapers are coming and must do everything in their power to ensure they won't win. Though with Eldar being obsessed with keeping their own kind safe, they might just as well sabotage the other races just to save their own skin. The very image of a craftworld wandering through terminus systems, too big and too powerful to be threatened by any warlord or pirate, would be fun. How would the Citadel Council react to this new force? How would the Eldar interact with this bizarre reality? Now, there is a question if Eldar would actually actively help during the Reaper War or hide in some corner of the galaxy, destroying any Reaper that would get close. It could go either way, but there is a potential for a story. Transporting Dark Eldar to Mass Effect Galaxy would be cruel. Extremely cruel, because those bastards are extremely evil. Reapers seem kind in comparison. Yet, for all their horror and grim darkness, Drukhari would be at quite a disadvantage in this galaxy. Webway is gone, so is Komora, the heart of their power. Unlike the Craftworld Eldar, not only they don't have access to their main bases, they no longer have any true connection to their psychic might. The most potent and dangerous weapons are beyond their reach, as they would be hid in the webway that isn't here. So what we have is a semi-organized fleet of pirates, slavers and murderers trying to figure out what to do in this new reality, and there is much to think about. How would Drukhari react seeing that there is no Dark Prince here? Would they change? Or try to retain the title of most brutal pirates and murderers of the galaxy? Knowing the Drukhari, probably the latter. There is potential for some horror story, with Drukhari securing a piece of terminus systems for their own use and raid worlds across the galaxy for their own pleasure. Their technological advantage should keep them safe for the most part. But without the webway and Komora, I'm unsure how they would handle the Reapers. Their favorite strategy of running away and hiding won't work here. Not to mention with all the plotting, scheming and backstabbing, there's a good chance that Drukhari would sabotage each other until it would lead to their annihilation. Without someone like Vec to keep them in check, I can't see the Dark Eldar remaining something that would resemble a cohesive force. I'm also half certain they would try to use Reaper indoctrination as a tool of torture, only to get indoctrinated themselves. Hell, with Warp being inactive, I'm unsure how much of our dark technology that relies on pain and suffering of souls would actually work. So that most definitely would shake the Drukhari society to their core. It could actually be amusing to see Dark Eldar overconfidence, malice and scheming be their own undoing, their very hubris, the cause of their downfall. Though, Reapers having access to even a fraction of Drukhari technology would make them 1,000 times more terrifying. How would that influence the Reaper War is hard to predict. Honestly, I'm half certain Drukhari would sabotage everyone's effort in fighting the Reapers, confident that they can survive the onslaught and take the galaxy for their own, only to realize they most definitely do not have the numbers to challenge all Reaper forces and meet their end screaming in terror, consumed by a different kind of monster than the Dark Prince. Now, people who watch my channel most likely expect that I will now explain why the Tau Empire is the best faction to send to Mass Effect Galaxy. But you would be wrong, for the very similar reason why sending any significant piece of the Imperium would shatter the setting. Population of Gwevesa within Tau Empire without a doubt exceeds 12 billion. Can you imagine how much the setting would shift if humans of the Systems Alliance suddenly became a minority of humans in the galaxy? That would be too big and too drastic of a change. I won't mention population density of the Tau Empire itself, which is far higher than some might suspect. On top of that, forget the technological advantages of the Tau. There is a problem with the Ethereals and their ambition. Now, it's not a certain thing, but I'm like 65% sure the Tau Empire would go full Cerberus and try to find a way to control the Reapers. The Ethereals already manipulate and indoctrinate the people of their empire. Why not ensure that all follow the greater good, with the help of the Reapers? With Reapers' talent for manipulation, I'm sure they would be able to convince the Ethereals that controlling them would be possible, just to lure them into a trap. Of course, they would end up as Cerberus, getting indoctrinated themselves and granting Reapers access to all of their technology, which would simply seal the fate of Milky Way, because Reapers, boosted with Tau tech, would be downright unstoppable. And if they don't try to take control of the Reapers, the Tau Empire is strong enough to dominate Mass Effect Galaxy and challenge the Reapers both. They have technological superiority, clear advantage in the void and on the ground, and thanks to their propaganda, a good chance that a portion of local races will join their ranks willingly. Sure, they prefer diplomacy, but they are ambitious enough for the new expansion that would ensure their hegemony in this reality. But frankly, That's a really dumb narrative. I am against wank stories, where narration would focus on showing how awesome and amazing a chosen faction is, how they dominate everyone. I don't like power fantasies. Tau might be my favorite faction in 40k, but there is no way I would promote this type of a story. Same way with Cerberus. They already exist as misguided, power-hungry fools trying to control the Reapers. No need to use Tau to replace them. So, what are we left with? Out of all the factions, only Craftworlders have any real potential, and even then it's a bit of a stretch because of how Eldar treat everyone who isn't Eldar. So there's a question of how interesting would be watching Eldar speaking about their innate superiority to the factions of Mass Effect. Is this all we can think about while seeking an interesting narration for Mass Effect versus Warhammer 40k? Not exactly. Because there is one more faction, a sub-faction really, that should be considered in this discussion. A splinter faction of a Tau Empire where you won't find Ethereals and their blind ambition. A faction led by the renowned traitor to the greater good. Chasseur Viola Shova Kais Montir, commonly known as Commander Farsight. Indeed, my dear viewers and listeners. In my most positively unbiased opinion, the Farsight Enclaves are the best faction to be transported into Mass Effect universe, while keeping the overall setting stable and not shattering it like an egg. Let's look at what the Enclaves bring to this crossover. First, they are small, with only 4 notable septs. Their exact size isn't known, but I doubt they have more than 40 worlds. They also have far less population, so on demographic level, they won't shatter the galaxy. Even with dedicated human planet, Guevesario, we know that this world doesn't have dense population. So, while adding to the overall number of humans in the galaxy, the population of the Systems Alliance won't become a minority of humans overnight, if Enclaves appear in Mass Effect. Next, unlike the Tau Empire, Enclaves have far slower and measured expansion. In fact, they prefer to defend their borders rather than expand, turning their space into a literal fortress, guarded from all threats. So, unlike the Tau Empire, I am quite certain that the Enclaves wouldn't attempt to conquer or dominate the galaxy. The expansions and military actions taken by the Enclaves would be focused on ensuring the security of their own borders. In terms of technology, Enclaves are slightly behind the Tau Empire, but they still have very potent technology by Mass Effect standards. But while potent, they don't have the industrial capacity of a main empire, limiting the threat and potential to shatter the established setting. Additionally, the fact that the Enclaves have a tech tree that is completely independent of Reaper's tech would, without a doubt, be an interesting subject to think about. Next, unlike the Ethereals, I am certain that Farsight wouldn't try to control the Reapers. He would recognize their threat and do everything in his power to ensure their destruction, making him a potential ally to Commander Shepard. A potential bromance narrative between the two would be really fun. Both are charismatic leaders who don't like being manipulated or be under anyone's influence. Both have a strong sense of justice and the willpower to break the rules if it means saving lives. On top of that, interactions between shepherds and Farsight's companions would be really fun as well. Every person here has a lot of character, and I can't imagine how fun it would be to see them argue and work together towards the common goal. Next is the fact that, just like the Tau Empire, Enclaves would engage in diplomacy rather than warfare, and with diplomatic talks and understanding between the species being integral part of Mass Effect narrative, the Enclaves can fit quite nicely without disturbing the established setting too much. Then there is their connection to AI, which is outlawed in the Citadel space, mostly because of Geth Rebellion. Unlike the Votann, I doubt Tau would hide their close ties with AI, which would be an interesting source of conflict between the Enclaves and Citadel Council, especially with Oblotai, an AI engram of long-dead Tau, being a member of the Eight. That is, Farsight and his ruling council, which take role of guardians and defenders of the Enclaves. This relation between AI and Tau extends to the Quarians and the Geth, expanding the narrative and deepening interaction between those factions. We have also important narration from Farsight perspective. Now stranded in this strange galaxy, he can no longer save his people from the Ethereals, so he must focus on ensuring safety of the Enclaves and their continuous prosperity. Lastly, there is much narrative potential depending on where the Enclaves end up. Geographically, that is. Some might think I would place them on the eastern fringe, in territories claimed by the Systems Alliance, or the Attican Traverse, making potential conflict with the Systems Alliance part of a narration. But I think we should look at relative position of Sol System while determining where the Enclaves end up. Sol System is located in the south of the map in Mass Effect. And with knowledge that Tau Empire and Farsight Enclaves are on the opposite side of the galaxy to Terra in 40k, they end up deep in Terminus systems, which is frankly perfect. The wild and untamed nature of Terminus systems is the perfect environment for Farsight and his Enclaves. They are far from Citadel space, so a scenario where Citadel Council launches a brutal war to stop them from using AI is near zero. Sanctions won't work because, again, Terminus systems. And even if they don't expand beyond what they would consider a requirement to secure their territories, they would be considered a major power in the region. Their military and technology giving them advantage over everyone in Terminus systems. Even Arya Tolok, leader of Omega, will be forced to recognize Farsight and his influence. Another weight placed on the galactic disk, creating a potential rival to the title of Hegemon for the Citadel Council. Frankly, number of potential narratives is quite significant, which is why I will be continuing Mass Effect vs Warhammer 40k series, discussing different scenarios of how Farsight Enclaves might interact with this new reality. But that's about it for this video. the first video in a new series on my channel. If you want to see more videos like this, remember to like, comment, subscribe and ring that bell. If you can, support me on Patreon. Remember about the discount code HATSupremacy to get 80% off on all tiers. I also encourage you to donate to Ko-fi Art Budget so that the art gallery for Star Wars x Warhammer 40k series could grow even more. I would also like to add my personal thanks for supporting me for last 2 years of making videos. You are all wonderful. Thank you for joining me, and I hope you enjoyed. Now, my dear viewers and listeners, remember, wherever you are, whatever you do, try to enjoy yourself while you can. I wish you most heretical day. Ta-ta!